In this recording, we're going to explore the relationship or ships between the creator, whatever that may be, the source of creation, and its creation. First of all, we have to clarify our meaning when we say creation. Here what we are referring to is that the sum total of everything that exists. Here also the word existence needs to be explored and clarified again. But let's go a step at a time. The sum total of everything that is created ever before, now, or will be created. This is all part of the grand scheme of creation. However you want to look at it, regardless of your belief system or your rationale that you are using in order to come up with a definition or satisfactory answer to this question, makes really no difference. Because logically, everything that comes into existence becomes it has a cause. Now, there are many ways of looking at this relationship, but nonetheless, the fundamental relationship between cause and effect is still in order. So when we are talking about creation, is the complete package. Everything that comes into existence is part of creation. Now, at this point, if we are going to stick to the physical creation, that means we only accept what is made of or stays in relation to particles of matter or other phases of matter, such as energy and that sort of things. So matter and energy is basically two phases of the same thing, two sides of the same coin. So there is nothing left out. Even if we limit ourselves to physical creation, nothing is left out of the creation, that package, when we're talking about physical creation. Everything that is in the creation already is. In this case, physical, because we are not going to venture into something that is non-physical for now. In other words, creation is what is. That is creation. There's no outside, no externality, or any of these adjectives work, because it is one single unit, and that's what it is. Now, conceptualizing something like that is not possible for us, because we are relational beings. We understand something in relation to something else. If there's only one thing of that thing, not having any relationship to anything else because there is nothing else, this concept we are not capable of encompassing and comprehending. We can entertain the concept, but when it comes to the surface in our imagination, well, we see that it's isolated. So which means what? When something is isolated, that means there's an externality to it. Isolated from what? Isolated from everything else. So it is not possible for us to comprehend something like that. So we are going to continue, and we are actually forced to continue this train of thoughts by holding on and using our concept of creation representing the actual thing. So in this case, we have a concept that is everything. That concept represents the total of creation. Now, this creation we have previously referred to when we were explaining the concept of a system, or the system theory in general. Since it is representing the totality of creation, it is a system that is self-sustained. Why? Because if it is representing, if it is the total creation, there's nothing else that could interject, that could sustain this total creation from anywhere, anyhow, through any channels. Because there is nothing else. Everything is part of the creation, and that creation is the only creation. There is nothing beside it. It cannot be, because then we're looking at a creation that is, a part of it is here, a part of it is there. Even in that case, we need to bring everything together. We say, well, the sum total of all of these is the total creation, which is the same thing that we're right now referring to. So no matter how you look at it, we'll come back by force, logically, to oneness, singularity. It's a single entity. It's a single creation. So just in parentheses, I like to mention that even when we are thinking about, let's say in the physical sense, thinking about multiple universes, multiverses, even in that case, the multiverses altogether is still one single creation. Now we have different versions, but they're all part of the same system. It is one single system. So it is, as a matter of fact, must be, has to be necessarily self-sustainable. There is nothing else to sustain it. It has to be self-sustained, and has always been, is, and will be. And this is something that we cannot test out, but we need to assume, because of what? Based on our observation that this creation has been, at least as far as we can go back in our past, and as far as we can foresee in the future. Now, there are other ways of looking at this which we cannot get into right now, because it needs to be introduced with certain understanding in order to make sense. So we're not going to do that here. We're just going to stick to our subject matter and go on, and then maybe in other recordings we can get into that part of it. It is not that difficult to figure it out. However, it needs some depth. So this self-sustained creation, perpetual, because it's self-sustained, and that's one of the reasons I say it's not that difficult to understand that it is perpetual. It is eternal. Eternity, when we say something is eternal, we take it out of the time equation. Has nothing to do with time. Time has no relationship with eternity. Because eternity is not possible to be imagined, we cannot possibly comprehend it. It's infinite. We have to resort to something that is in a small version of that infinity, and it is final. It is finite. That's when time comes in. We have to understand it under the coverage of time. So this creation is self-sustained, perpetual, eternal. And it exists. So the word existence we introduce here, and we need to clarify that. Existence, something that exists, owes its existence to a source. Now, what's special about that source? The source of existence is that it must be capable of bestowing that existence that it has and owns to something else. So that's when something comes into existence. So it's never existence from nothing. It's existence from the source of existence. Before the existence was bestowed, yes, there was nothing. But the existence, the source of existence, is eternal and self-sustaining. So existence is always potentially there. When it's bestowed upon, something else receives that existence and exists, starts existing, let's say. Another fine point about existence is that the source of existence being able to bestow existence, although it means that existence is potentially available as a source, but not necessarily limited to that. Let's offer an example here, possibly can simplify this matter. Not oversimplify it, but simplify it. Make it easier to approach it with a better understanding. We did use this example previously. We're going to go back to it. Is the example of a carpenter capable of making or building a chair. Now, the existence of chair owes it owes itself to the carpenter. Carpenter is the source that bestows the existence to the chair. That means the chair is made by the carpenter. If there was no carpenter, there would be no chair. There would be no chair. Now, we're not going to say if there was no carpenter, if there was a carpenter, doesn't mean it has to be a chair. We can. There are many ways of approaching this one. That is the subject matter by itself. We're not going to get into that. It's kind of difficult, actually, to thoroughly wrap our heads around that, if it's possible at all. But these are all relationship type dependencies that make them understandable only in relationship to all other things. So the carpenter is capable of building a chair. Chair comes into existence because of the carpenter. But is the carpenter's existence, even if you use the same word, is it the same existence as the existence of the chair? Now we know the chair is made of wood. Carpenter is not made of wood. That's not what we're referring to. We're referring to the essence itself. The essence of existence, the types of existence. Not what material is, it's made of. Okay, it could be made of stone, wood, which is plant, animal, which is basically flesh and bone, or even human beings, still flesh and bone, physically speaking. We're not talking about these differences. We talk about the essential difference, which is the qualitative difference. Existence. The qualitative difference in existence. Even though at that level, maybe existence, the word itself, cannot really be applied to the source of existence, because existence is something that's bestowed outwardly, if I can use that word to make it easier to follow, outwardly, and something comes into existence. The source of existence has no obligation to be the same as what is emanated outwardly and gives existence. Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be the same. In fact, we're going to argue that it is not the same, and it cannot be the same, and we are not capable of figuring out what it is, but we can put our finger on it and say it's not the same. It cannot be the same. That we can do. We're going to try. We're going to try to demonstrate that. In order to do this, we need to step back and look at existence again. See, existence itself, it's a dependent relationship. In contrast to independent relationship, which doesn't make any sense, because if there is a relationship, it cannot be independent. So we're only talking about dependency and independence. One, which is the dependency, is another word for relationship. On the other hand, on the contrary, independence denies, essentially refutes any relationship whatsoever. There are no dependencies, no relationships. Now, generally speaking, what we are capable of understanding and comprehending, they are all, without an exception, understood because of their dependency, interdependency, and the relationships, mutual relationships among everything that is in creation. That's how we come about to understand and comprehend something. This is the way, even in this physical body, this is the way that our faculty of intellect operates. We cannot possibly even imagine an absolute. An absolute means that it's not relative. It's not related, it's not dependent on anything else. We cannot imagine absolute independence. It cannot do that. Our faculty of intellect is not capable, is not wired, if you will, to even tackle something like this, let alone comprehending it. And it makes a lot of sense, because when we are talking about independence and absoluteness, it is no longer a finite entity. It's not a finite state, so hence we cannot we cannot, and it makes sense, how can our mind encompass, which is itself limited, our mind, our faculty of intellect, limited tool, can encompass something that's infinite, limitless, impossible. That's illogical. Now, going back to the existence, so existence, something that has a source, potentially, is at the source. That source holds this power, bestows it, gives existence. Hence, the creation came into existence out of that source. Notice we're only referring to very, how do you say it, we're not using any definitely non-religious terminology. We're not using any of those. We're not using any religious terminology, and even the spiritual terminology. If we're going to use any of those in order to help us to explain better, we need to first identify those, and we need to clarify them, not only their meanings, but their relationship to the other terms that we might come across or use. So here we cannot really deny that existence has a source. And this source, even if we just look at the creation itself, it needs to be independent in itself, in its own essence. Hence, everything that comes into existence is dependent, because they owe their existence to the source, so they are dependent not only to the source but also among themselves. Everything in creation is in relationship to everything else in the creation. Okay? Everything is in all is something, one is in all is in one, and one in all is in all, or something like that. There's a nice phrase that I used before, but I seems incapable of paraphrasing it right, or even say what it was. Anyway, now, so far so good. That we can still follow in our mind. But here comes the first difficulty that we need to face here, is that's hence we came up with we gave the example of the carpenter. The carpenter now is capable of many things. One of the things that is capable, and it is very important, we're not going to oversimplify that or underestimate it, is the bestowing existence, bringing something else, another being, creating a chair. Certainly, chair itself, which is created by the carpenter in degrees of perfections, is imperfect compared to the carpenter itself. No doubt about that. We're stepping away from the source of perfection, hence we become one step away from perfection, which is and a step into imperfection. So obviously, to describe the carpenter as a chair maker, we are limiting the infinite capabilities, potentially infinite capabilities of the carpenter. We imposing limitations on that and bringing it down to a finite, in this case, making a chair only. So, in this case, the word existence or exist still makes sense. The carpenter gives existence to the chair receives its existence from the existence that is available in the carpenter. In fact, the carpenter itself here is existence. Although it does make sense, but notice what we had to do. We needed to first limit the carpenter to this sort of existence, to bestow an existence, making a chair, building a chair. But this is not certainly correct. We are making an assumption based on nothing, that the source of existence is capable of giving existence, bestowing existence only. Hence, the same existence that creates the world of creation is the same existence that that source of existence exists with. That's the same kind of condition, let's say, that it could exist. That's a huge assumption. And we're going to attempt to show that this is an incorrect assumption. Hence, the word existence above and beyond the sum total of creation cannot be applicable. We are applying this word, but erroneously. It really cannot be applied. So, the source of existence is capable of giving existence, i.e., creating, in no way or shape means that that source is limited to that existence, to bestowing that existence, creating. And it does not mean that it is itself dependent upon, which is not. Just the word dependent itself creates problems here. That source itself owes its existence to existence that is bestowing and creating. Very difficult to explain these things using our language, obviously, but we do what we can do. Now, can we go ahead and just, even having this doubt, we know this assumption is far-fetched, too far-fetched. Can we still go ahead and apply the same word, existence, not only to creation, but also to the source of creation? Probably not. But we also have, at this point, we have nothing to replace it with. So that vacuum is created, which needs to be filled. But we just can't fill it with something that is incorrect. We have to search and see, is there any way that makes sense rationally, logically, for this hole to be filled, for this vacuum to make sense? One thing here that I forgot to mention, which is about the dependency and independency, is that dependency of the creation upon the source of creation is obvious. What is not obvious is that there cannot be any relationship between the source of creation and creation. If there is any relationship, that means there is a relative what do you call that? A relative what? A relative, I want to use relationship, but it's redundant. But so let's put it another way. There cannot be any relationship between the source of creation and creation. Why? From the point of view of the creator, the source, because that creates dependency. And a source that bestows cannot be dependent on its creation. Otherwise, it's not single, because it's relative to something else. Its existence is not it's also dependent. And what's the other one? Self-sustaining. It cannot be self-sustaining. If it's in relation to something else, how could it be self-sustaining? That self-sustainability needs independence before everything else. Independence means no relationship whatsoever except by itself, to itself. Its relationship is to its own relationship. Its relationship exists with itself, not with anything else. Which is basically when something has a relationship with itself, means it's self-sustained. It's perpetual within that system. Whatever that system is. So here we go back to what we mentioned a few minutes ago regarding that. Is it correct or is it incorrect to use the same word existence in relationship, or let's say when we are referring to the source of existence? Based on what we came up with and could think of, demonstrated, conceptualized, no, it is not correct. Because it's creating a vacuum, we don't have a word to put in. Doesn't mean we have to force in a word to fill in the vacuum, although that force is not applicable. Cannot do that. We need to keep it vacuum, keep it empty, till we come up with a satisfactory, logical, rational explanation, possibly, if at all. Another way of looking at this is that how do we know something exists? How do we know that the source of existence has bestowed existence upon an entity? Well, in the physical sense, we can observe it, we can detect it, we can touch it, smell it, see it, etc. We can detect it. We can detect it with our tool, which is the faculty of intellect, and all the other instruments that we have at our disposal. What does that mean? It means that existence makes sense only in creation. So I'm gonna say in a statement. I don't know how it's going to be interpreted, but it's very deep, and we need to take our time and let it be digested. And this is the statement that when we apply existence to an entity, it's always after this stage of bestowing existence. Something comes into existence, we call it exists. We say it exists. It has bestowed existence. The source has bestowed existence upon that entity, so that entity comes into being and exists. Before this stage of existence, before the stage of coming into existence, if I can use that phrase, what happens to existence before that stage? Does it exist? Based on our understanding of existence, existence only makes sense in the creation. Creation means is a stage after bestowing existence. Given existence becomes created, comes into creation. What happens before that? Can even the stage before that, prior to the creation, can we still apply existence? Existence depends upon its appearance and being in the world of creation, in the created world. Prior to that step, no existence, the way we understand it, exists. No such a thing. So the only thing we can say perhaps here is that the existence that we refer to in creation is potentially there. Where? I don't know, but somewhere. Potentially. It's potential. When it's actualized, that's when creation takes place and existence makes sense. I don't have any problem with that. But we haven't solved anything yet, because we asked the question that whether we can still apply the word existence to the source of existence, which is limited. This is why we asked the question. Could that source goes beyond existence, which means that existence is only one of the things that could come out of that source. Just like a carpenter is capable of making or building many things. The chair that is made by the carpenter is only one example. We cannot use that chair and reflect it back and talk about the capabilities or one single ability of the carpenter. Obviously not. We cannot do that. That would be limiting. That would be exclusivity instead of inclusivity. And we are definitely in the business of including everything instead of taking one thing at the cost of excluding everything else. So we see that the difficulty still exists, and in a way we're getting closer to the point, if we haven't arrived yet, that the word existence cannot be applied to the source of existence. Now I'm trying to come up with an example that potentially, something that is potentially is different from when it's actualized. Some physical example to show this more clearly. Let's say battery. But then again, let's just go through this example and see what the problem is. We see if it's if it could help us. A battery has potential, electric potential. But when we look at a battery, we cannot see the electric potential in it unless we connect a pair of wires, and then at the other end of two wires connected to each other, we connected a bulb, a light bulb, and the light bulb will light up when there is electrical potential in the battery. Actualizes itself that we can see it when the light comes on. Now, the same power that is in the battery potentially comes into existence in the light bulb. It's the same power. But they manifest themselves differently. In fact, the one that is potential does not manifest itself at all. It's hidden. It manifests itself once it comes into existence in the light bulb. So how would that help us understanding not to apply existence? It cannot. It really does not help us at all, because we still have to use the word potential and we still have to use the word existence. Does not help the matter at all. It's not going to add anything to our understanding. You're just going to look at the same thing through another keyhole. So here, really, when we come to a halt, we cannot go any further, although at least we know that if we limit the source of existence to existence itself, that is incorrect and it's limiting. Now, one thing I want to mention one thing before we end this recording, and that is that in the religious scriptures and esoteric and schools of philosophy, up to an extent, when they tackle this challenge, this difficulty, they do mention that although they're still using the same word existence, I've never seen anywhere that they even talk about not using it, because it doesn't make any sense. It's not applicable any longer to the source of existence. But they do mention that, divine capabilities are infinite, which automatically means what? Means that existence is not all. Not that it's not important, it's the most important, because creation is existence. I mean, what could be more important than that? What is existence. But at the same time, they do mention that source, if it's in the religious scriptures, they call it God or the Creator, anything like those, and in the esoteric schools and philosophical schools, they call it let's say the orb of the universe, the source of all sources, the essence of all essences, which is also used in the religious scriptures, especially in the writings of the Baha'i faith. So those are mentioned, but still, and I'm not sure if this is forced upon them. I mean, actually probably is, because what else are they going to replace that word existence when it's referred to the source of existence? For the life of me, I cannot think of anything else. But at the same time, I do realize that I cannot forget that source of existence is not the same, necessarily not the same as existence. Hence, the word existence cannot be applied to the source of existence. In other words, when we are talking about existence of creation, I exist, this chair here exists, that cat over there exists, God exists. That makes no sense. Because our definition of existence is very limited. It's limited to what? To creation. But we have something that's the source of creation. No, there's no way to know what state, condition is it in, but we know it's the source of existence. A source of something has to be at least superior to what the source has given or bestowed existence to upon. So that is a difficulty that I think has nothing to do with how far we develop by conceptualizing more clear concepts. Nothing to do with that. It's just that we are created, we are creatures, we are entities, beings, exist in the world of existence, which is the created world, the creation itself, and all our activities, regardless of any thing that you can come up with, we are part of a closed system, self-sustained, eternally perpetual. All that is created stays in creation, nothing added or subtracted. And also, this is a subject matter that we need to do a recording on, about the why the system has to be self-sufficing. And physically speaking, obviously, materially, it follows the principle of conservation of energy and matter. Anyway, that's about it. We have to leave it here for now.